Well, we've been gathering with thousands, I guess, up and down the land and in other parts, perhaps as well, of the world, remembering those who've given their lives, remembering past conflicts and ongoing places of conflict as well. And on this day, the words of John Maxwell Edmonds will have been heard. They were on the screen a little bit earlier. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today. But also today, people will be listening to the words of Jesus Christ, who said, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The word love is thrown around so casually, isn't it, in our conversation. We love our hobbies, we love our jobs, we love our teams, we love our chocolate. It's kind of loosened the word love. But we know that Jesus' words are actually right, aren't they? That real love is shown in sacrifice, laying down a life for somebody else. The engineers on the Titanic, apparently when they realized this great ship was sinking, they went back down below decks to keep the engines running so that the lights could still shine, so that as many people as possible could be rescued. And they've gone down in that particular history as heroes. And there are also many war heroes, stories through war of people who have risked their lives, who have given their lives, and they have been awarded Victoria Crosses, the highest award that can be given, or some have gone unsung heroes, unrecognized. So what makes a war hero? Well, let me suggest three things. Number one, they brave the battle. War heroes, they brave the battle. To brave the battle means to face danger with courage and a willingness to keep on fighting. It was the 80th anniversary of D-Day, wasn't it, in June this year. And many of the veterans went over for the special celebrations in Normandy. Many, like Jack Mortimer, are quick to say, I'm not a hero, definitely not a hero. The only hero in any war are the ones that don't come back. My little ditty says, so grateful to be alive, so grateful to have survived, so sorry so many had to die, so many heroes, and there they lie in Normandy. But I guess I'd like to say to Jack, yeah, but you braved the battle too. You went up the beaches. You faced the bullets. World War I soldier called Jimmy Seed. He was 19 years old, and he just got out of the pits, the coal pits, as a miner, and he signed professional terms with Sunderland FC. He'd just become a professional footballer, and then the war began. After one season, he responded to the call, and this is what he says. Football had ceased to be the most important thing in life for me. Britain and Germany were at war, and playing football was no longer such a thrill. And at the front, he suffered severe bouts of depression. He was later invalided out of the fighting because of gas poisoning. Jimmy braved the battle at personal cost. Thankfully, there was a happy ending. He came through the war, and he went on to play for Spurs. Maybe that's not so good. So, war heroes brave the battle. What else do they do? Well, they lay down their lives, many of them. Many of them lay down their lives. Captain Noel Chavas is one of only 3 people to be awarded the Victoria Cross twice. He's from Merseyside. He's a doctor, son of a bishop, first-class degree from Oxford University, a place on the Great Britain Olympic team in 1908. He ran the 400 metres. And in August 1916, he was awarded the Victoria Cross for saving around 20 men while wounded at the Somme. And he wrote a letter to his parents. Then after that, he says, I shall get married about Christmas. Gladys is looking forward to that, his fiancée. I'll feel rather a fool after the war, a married man without a job. I don't think I earned it, that's the Victoria Cross, as many men have had to do, but I prize it more than I can say. So there he is, Noel. He has hopes for the future. He's writing home, hopes for the future. And he told his parents how he had turned down the safety of a surgeon's job. They offered him a surgeon's job. He could have gone away from the front line and been safe, relatively. He said, I thought I had better stay with the lads. I felt rather depressed about it for a quarter of an hour. And then at Passchendaele on the 31st of July, Noel was hit in the head, but refused to leave despite a fractured skull. He ventured into no man's land and was treating the wounded. His first aid post was shelled on the 2nd of August, and he died on the 4th of August, aged 32. He could have saved his life, but he chose to lay it down for the lads. His last letter to his fiancée said, duty called and called me to obey. War heroes lay down their lives. And war heroes carry out commands. Eileen Nairn is a name I came across recently. She grew up in France, but escaped to Britain during the Nazi invasion. She became a spy for the Special Operations Executive. They were called Churchill's Secret Army, and parachuted into France to go deep undercover, all before her 23rd birthday. She lived in constant peril, operating between secret radio lines between London and Paris, arranging weapons drops for the French resistance. And eventually she was captured by the Gestapo. She was sent to concentration camps. She was tortured, but she never revealed her true identity or her mission. She was shuttled from death camp to death camp. She escaped twice and reached safety. She died in 2010. She carried out commands. And the other story was a man called Major Douglas Lidderdale. He worked under direct orders from Winston Churchill. He led one of the most dangerous operations in World War II. He had to go to Tunisia with his small group of men, and the instructions were this: to capture a Tiger tank, a German, a Nazi Tiger tank. These were feared by the Allied troops. There was what they called Tiger phobia, because these Tiger tanks were able to destroy powerfully so many of the other tanks of the Allies. Virtually unstoppable. But if the Allied engineers could get one of these Tiger tanks and see how it worked and take it apart, they could develop an offensive weapon that could take on those Tiger tanks. Well, Major Douglas Lidderdale managed to fulfill his mission. He captured and delivered a Tiger tank to Churchill. And the new technology was decisive on D-Day. Both those characters were carrying out their commands faithfully. Now, I just want to return to Jesus Christ, whose words we heard at the beginning. Greater love has no one than this, they lay down their life for their friends. And I want to suggest to you that Jesus Christ is the greatest war hero. He said those words not on a battlefield, but he said those words at a supper. It was the Last Supper. And he said them to his friends. He knows that he's going to the cross. He's going to die. He never lifted a weapon, and he never led an army. But he is the greatest war hero. Because Jesus braves the battle. Born as a baby in Bethlehem, son of Mary. But that's not the full story, is it? The Bible tells us that his story began from eternity, the Son of God. His words and his actions and his claims point him to be the Son of God, existing with his Father. And like Jimmy Seed, that footballer from Sunderland, he could have chosen not to brave the battle, not to enter, but to stay in heaven, to stay in glory. The Bible says he chose to come into such a world as this. He didn't grasp equality with God for himself, selfishly, but he came to serve, not to be served. We talk about people being in the trenches, don't we? I want people who've been in the trenches, you say. What does that mean? People who've lived through some suffering, who have endured, who have fought. And Jesus is someone who's been in the trenches with you. He's experienced suffering and sorrow. He shared your humanity. He shed tears. He walked my road. He felt my pain, joys and sorrows that I know so well. In World War I, some of the soldiers were poets, and they wrote poems of anger against their leaders, the generals who never experienced the kind of suffering that the normal soldiers were experiencing in trench war. But that's not true of Jesus, the Son of God. He comes down into such a world as this. He knows the conflict of what it's like to live here. He is Emmanuel, God with us. He braves the battle. The Bible says he's come to fight our fight, to win the war. But Jesus also lays down his life. He uses that phrase several times, doesn't he? Greater love has no one than this. They lay down their life. He's talking about himself, primarily, as well as an example to his friends. In the reading we had earlier, he said, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Captain Noel Shavas, he knew the risks he was taking, didn't he? But he didn't intend to die. He intended to come through the war and get married. He didn't intend to lay down his life. But Jesus knew that this was his mission. Jesus knew that he was coming to lay down his life at the cross. To give his life as a ransom for many, he says. And when you read about this, the number of deaths, say, in the Battle of the Somme, just in one day, how many young men were cut down, you begin to think, what was it all for? You go to those war graves and you see the numbers. What was it all for? There's a sense of futility. But Jesus' death was not a futile act. It was full of saving grace. And the reason for this is that we were in danger. We're not in danger from Nazism, not from a tyrant who's coming to threaten us politically. We're in danger from the justice of a good God. We've all gone AWOL from God. We've all gone our own way, the Bible says. And that's an act of treason. And so a punishment is coming towards us. We deserve this. But God sends his own Son to take our place, to take the bullets for us. One historian, when he wrote about World War II, he described it as all hell let loose. He says that's what all the soldiers said, interviewing them and reading their letters. That's the phrase that keeps coming out. All hell let loose. Well, do you know the Bible says at the cross, all hell was let loose. And where did it fall? Fell on Jesus. All what we deserve was placed on him. He stands in the gap for us. He lays down his life for us. Noel Shavas won the Victoria Cross twice. But Jesus' cross brings victory for us. One of the writers in the Bible discovered this. He couldn't get over it. And he talked about, he says, the Son of God who loved me and who gave himself for me. You see, it wasn't just duty that sent Jesus to the cross. It was love. Jesus lays down his life. And then Jesus carries out commands. Why did he do it? He's carrying out commands. Here's those words that DJ read to us earlier from John chapter 10. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me. I lay down my life. I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. You think of Elaine Nairn and Douglas Lidderdale willingly obeying Churchill, willingly obeying their commander. They're going out and they're obeying commands. Jesus, whose command is he obeying? His Father's. He's come to do his Father's will. Jesus willingly goes to the cross. And yet there's a huge difference, isn't there? Because all those other people we've mentioned and all the other people we've thought about today laid down their lives and died. Jesus did that to show his love. But that's not the end of the story, is it? For Jesus has the authority, the command to take it up again, to rise, to conquer death, to give us hope. It's a bit like, capturing the tiger tank. Death is this like tiger tank, and we're all afraid of it. It's unstoppable. If we're going to face it, that's it for us. Death is like that, the tiger tank. But Jesus has captured the tiger tank of death, and he's dismantled it, and he's risen again. And he says, you put your faith in me, and you rise too. Death is not the end. It's not the victor. Jesus has risen. Put your faith in him. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die. So let me appeal to you this morning. I appeal to you. Jesus Christ is making an appeal to you this morning, the risen one. And he's saying, come and trust in me. Put your faith in me. Find peace with God. I can take away the fear of death and give you a hope for the future. Now you say, well, I'd like to know a bit more about that. Well, fair enough. That's what these are for. This is a record of Jesus' life. And this is an accompanying thing, hero. A better hero. All about Jesus. It helps you. They go together. And if you know somebody here, you come this morning, you know somebody who's a Christian, ask them to read it with you. Explains a bit more about who he is. Well, does it work, you say? Does it really work? Well, we're going to sing a song in a minute to close. Abide with me. Sung on days like this. It'll be sung up and down the land today. Sung at the cup finals, rugby league and FA Cup final, every year. It was written by a man called Henry Francis Lyte. And he was pastor of a little church in Devon for the last 23 years of his life. In fact, before that, he'd been a minister in a church, but he didn't know the Christian faith. He didn't know Christ until he had a friend dying, a man who had hope in Jesus. And it really spoke to him. And it made him see the Bible in a new way and trust in Jesus for the first time. Anyway, he was diagnosed with TB and his health worsened. And finally, in September 1847, he was 54 years old. He stood before his congregation like this, and he said his last farewells. He says this was his last message. He went for a walk on the beach for about an hour, and then he went back to his room, and he wrote this song we're going to sing, Abide with Me. And then he left. He was going for warmer weather in Italy. Hopefully that would help him. He never got to Italy. It was while he was in France, the French Riviera, he passed away. There was a minister with him, and he reported that Henry's last words were peace, joy. Why was that? Well, maybe the last words of the song will help us. Hold thou thy cross before my closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's vain shadows flee. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me. That's what you need. When you come to die, you need a hero. And Jesus is the hero.